We are creating a cluster of architecture models which are from, I would say, the last 60 years of Hong Kong public housing out of exactly 1 square meter of leather material. You can see for the first model over here, this was the Mark I settlement housing in 1953. So it was represented and created with this orange-red leather out of the emergency and urgency of building housing in Hong Kong.
This came about because there was a fire. So there was actually a squatter village in Ship Kip Mei, and then there was a famous fire in 1953. And that fire then led and prompted the government to start to look into public housing. At one point in Hong Kong's history, almost half the housing in Hong Kong was actually built and developed by the government. For residential, half the city fabric is actually composed of what we see in front of us. And that's a huge proportion of any city to be just given and donated to just a set few building types that we see.
So we're actually been very interested in the transformation from, say, Mark I all the way to the latest one, which is the Concord tower block. It's really interesting to see the landscape of different types of building types over the history of Hong Kong and questioning how we can move in the future.
For leather, for us, it really represents individuality. Each piece of leather is made out of a natural process, and each piece is actually very different. And for us, to build this out of leather really starts to question the idea that each building could have its own sense of how that becomes created. And as architects, we're very interested in the idea of individuality. We're very interested in the idea of uniqueness. And leather also has that idea built into it as a material, as a fabric. It actually has diversity within each piece as well. And so we're contrasting the idea of leather with the idea of the buildings.
Yeah. Everyone is using so much technology and social media that everyone's forgetting the sense of touch. So I think it would be nice to combine the two. So having something very technologically advanced with something very well crafted and soft, and take those two directions together to produce something new. And I think it's exciting. I mean, imagine our whole city wrapped in leather. It's more soft, it's more sensual, it's more tactile. Kind of create a built environment that is much more attuned to the human being. So how do we think of using senses as a way to make something much more humanistic, I think is very important.
And I think what this starts to show is that if 50% of our built fabric was actually done with just a few building types, that it doesn't allow for as many sensations. And I think that a city should have more experiences if an individual has more control. So if all 7 million people have more of a say of how the buildings or how the city is constructed, we'd have much more opportunities that you have across the city to experience the city in different ways. And so I think what this also shows is to use a material that has so much of a textural sense to it and apply it to something that is incredibly generic, then allows us to question these values.